Good afternoon and welcome to You and Your Business with me, Alec on 103.2 Dublin City FM. Each week, I invite an expert from the world of business to share their knowledge, insights and tips to help you with your business challenges. If there's a topic you would like covered, or if you feel you can make a contribution, please email me at yourbusiness@dublincityfm.ie and perhaps we'll be having a chat here one day soon. And my guest today is the CEO and founder of Tricres. She has spent more than 25 years in professional services and is a licensed trainer in NLP and also endorsed by its co-creator. In a change to our normal program, we're actually breaking this into two individual programs, one following the other. Fascinating story. I'm delighted to welcome Rebecca Bonnington to the You and Your Business studio. Hi, Rebecca.
Hello, Alec. How are you?
Fascinating, and grateful. This is going to be great fun. We've talked through some of this. As you know, I take you back to your sort of last years in school and what was on your mind and what you were planning. Tell me a bit about this, because you had a plan that was conceived years before.
Yeah, I did have a plan. I knew from the age of about 13 or 14 that I needed to leave home and get away from home. I didn't have the best relationship with my mother. She was a single parent, and I think the stresses and strains of that she took out on me a little bit. Right. So I knew that education was my way out. I was reasonably academic, not at the top, but towards the top. And I thought, if I study really, really hard, I can get to university and I can leave home. So I just got my head down and got on with it, did my O-levels, did my A-levels, and then I was able to go.
It must have been a challenging time in your life, because, I mean, it's difficult enough for people as you know, adolescents studying without sort of things going on in the background to distract you even further.
Yeah, it was difficult. So I actually left home 2 days after my 18th birthday. So I was still studying for my A-levels. I was in lower sixth then. Right. And I moved in with my boyfriend at the time, who happened to have his own house. And my tutor at sixth form college said, you know, are you doing the right thing? Are you going to be able to study? My mother told me I would end up being a kept woman and I would amount to nothing. Right. So like a true polar responder, I went, right, well, I'll show you. And I probably studied harder than I would have studied at home, actually. Leaving probably resulted in a better outcome than staying at home. But I knew I had to go.
It's amazing. Your mother's intention wasn't quite what you're going to do. But this is it. People can motivate people just by being so negative.
Yeah.
All right. So, okay, you have a plan. You're now leaving school. You're now got enough to get into university. What were you going to be studying?
I did English literature. So I had a choice between history or English. I chose English literature because I just love reading. I still love reading today. I love all the classics. I love Shakespeare. I find language absolutely fascinating. Right. I think everything we need to know about humanity is in a book somewhere, either fiction or fact. And the great writers are great observers of human behavior and all its faults. And I just love reading.
Right. And of course, this was going to be playing a central part to your life as it progressed.
Yeah, it did. So I discovered NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, in 2006, and I couldn't believe there was a technology out there that involved focusing on language, and how important language is. And actually, even today, in the work that I do with my clients and other coaches and consultants, I talk about language a lot and how important it is to think about the words you use, not only to everybody out there, but also to yourself. And in fact, the words you use to yourself are the most important words. And so many people spend so much time being horrible to themselves, and then wonder why their lives don't turn out to be the way they want them to be,
Right.
So yeah, language crucial.
Well, we won't reveal too much of that at this stage of the
No.
interview, because I think your life story leading up to this is fascinating and an example to other people who may find themselves in similar circumstances. So obviously NLP, you're keen on that, but you're going to actually have to get into the real world and earn some money. So let's talk about that.
Okay. So I went to university to do English literature, not knowing where that was going to lead. I had a vague idea that maybe I could go into PR or marketing.
Right.
And I did the whole milk round interviews, but it became really clear from the interviews that I just was never going to fit into any kind of corporate role.
Right.
When I remember being interviewed by Nestle,
All right.
and the lady said, and what, would you move to Croydon? I went, no, it's horrible. Why would I want to move to Croydon? I live in York.
Apologies to people in Croydon.
Yeah, sorry, anybody at the time. This was in the late 80s, early 90s. It's probably vastly improved. Let's hope it has. And then I thought, oh, this is, the corporate life isn't going to work. Luckily, in the final year of university, I got a temp job. I did a typing test for a temp agency, and they got me into British Rail, as it was at the time. And I got into a project with management consultants who were working at Capgemini.
Right. Okay.
And they said, can you do desktop publishing? So it was the start of Macs. So I worked on one of the early Macs with the little tiny screen.
Oh, well familiar with them.
Yeah, you could be old enough. And they said, can you do desktop publishing? I went, yes, of course I can, which of course I couldn't. So I sat there pretending to do desktop publishing, and produced all their notes and presentations and things like that. And they were there after the Clapham Rail disaster.
Would you remind people just about that, what that was?
So that was terrible. So that was due to the lack of investment in British Rail, as it was government owned. And I think, I can't remember how many people died, but people died because the signaling systems were so outdated.
Wow.
And so crumbling that the train, I think it ploughed into a platform, if memory serves me correctly.
Wow.
It was horrendous. And so they had to do a whole review of the signal design systems and make investments. So there was this big recruitment campaign to get new engineers and really modernize the signaling systems. And the consultants went, you seem to be quite good at stuff. We'll put you in charge of that. Okay.
That's good. And if you're just joining us now, you're listening to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM, where my guest today is Rebecca Bonnington. And just picking up from that sort of tragic accident in which sort of you found yourself blagging your way into desktop publishing for leading consultants. That's fascinating how you have to learn on the hoof to keep yourself in that job.
Yeah, but don't you think, I think most business owners and entrepreneurs learn on the hoof.
Yes, they do. And they blag their way into.
You do. I had it with somebody the other day, and a client said to him, can you produce this leadership program for 25 of my staff? And he went, yes. And then he phoned me and went, how do I do that? It's okay, I've got it all here. I've even got the agendas for you. On you go.
Fascinating. But that's I think that's one of the the key components of being an entrepreneur is yes is the answer. Now what's the question?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's how you innovate and create.
Yes, we do. So okay, so your desktop publishing with your little Mac. Sorry you don't have it now today. I believe there were quite a few bob in the marketplace.
That would be funny, wouldn't it?
So okay, so you were doing that. How long were you going to be there?
I was with British Rail for about 18 months. And I started off at the lowest rung of the ladder. clericals. So my official job title was actually photocopying. I
Right.
never did any photocopying, but that was, and I worked my way up to the first line of management, and ended up being, I got the title of communications manager. Goodness knows why, but anyway.
Right.
And then they said, well, you've been promoted too quickly, so we're not going to promote you anymore. And I went, right, okay, well, I'll leave then, and
Right.
look for another job.
My goodness. All right. Well, dead right, of course. So age was important to them, unless you had the gray hair, they weren't interested in moving you to the next level.
So, well, if I tell you it was in York, 350 male engineers and 5 women.
Right. I think that says it all.
Yeah. Yes.
All right. So, okay, you've decided to move. What's on your mind? What's attracted your attention?
So I loved the management consultants and what they did, and I'd spend a lot of time talking to them and learning from them. And I thought, right, well, I'll be a consultant. So I
Oh,
saw an ad in the Yorkshire Post for recruitment consultant, and I applied because I thought it's got the word consultant in. I got the job, and it turned out it was talking to people on the phone, interviewing people, going out to see businesses. And I thought, this is brilliant. I'm going to get paid to be nosy and ask questions. This is just fantastic. And I loved it. And I turned out to be quite good at it.
right. Fantastic. All right. Not for everybody, but
No,
you found your home for the time being.
I did. I did.
So how did that progress? And
So I got on quite quickly, and I ended up running the Edinburgh office at the age of 24, being utterly clueless in what I was doing in terms of people management. I had a terrible boss who was useless. I didn't see him for 6 months.
right.
Yeah, which was not helpful. And so I made an almighty mess up of managing people, and probably made every single mistake there was to make, and including horrible, and I'm not proud of this at all. I made somebody cry, and it was awful. I just didn't know what I was doing, Alec. I did not have a clue what I was doing when it came to managing and leading people. I was still great at recruitment, so I ended up moving away from the office manager's role
Sure.
and just focused on building a particular market sector, which was really good at. And I did that very successfully for, I think it was a couple of years. Yeah, made a
And
lot of
isn't it
money.
quite interesting? And I mean, you have a vast amount of experience dealing with organizations.
Mm.
Isn't it amazing how often people without the skill sets are promoted into management away from something that they're particularly good at, only to find A, they hate it, and B, they're poor at that
It,
particular.
it drives me mad in that organizations, large and small, across the world, you're absolutely right, Alec, promote people who are great in a technical skill, and then they put them in charge of people. They are two entirely different mindsets, skill sets, abilities, and they often put them in charge of people without any training, without any support, and then wonder why it all goes horribly wrong. Yeah, and that's exactly what happened to me. And I guess that's part of why I do what I do, because I don't want that to happen to other people, because it was rotten for me, and it was rotten for the people who were subjected to my appalling management skills.
And I tell you, one of the key areas it happens in quite frequently is in sales.
Yeah,
The top salesperson is promoted into management, so the company now loses its top salesperson, and then has the worst manager they can have for the role.
every time, every time. And just because you can sell a lot doesn't mean you can lead and manage people.
No, no.
No.
Well, we know that, and
Yeah.
you were going to. Thank goodness we were going to find out further along in this interview how this was all going to pan out. All
Yes.
right, so Edinburgh office, 4.5 years. Family life though was starting to beckon for you.
Yeah, so family life got quite interesting, and not in a good way. So I was 27. I had my first baby. I was married at 25. And yeah, it was okay until I realized I was married to an alcoholic.
Wow.
which was not fun. It took me a long time to realize that. And people who don't know addicts will go, well, didn't you know he was an alcoholic? No, they're very good at hiding things. So it was when I was pregnant with our second child. So I was the main wage earner in the household, always was.
Right.
And so my ex-husband used to make the dinner. He was a really good cook, so he'd make the dinner every night. And I went into the kitchen and I had a sip of his orange juice, except it was vodka.
All right. Okay.
With this much orange juice.
Right.
And I suddenly realized why his behavior was so erratic, why he was so verbally abusive in the early days, and latterly that got physical. And I started joining the dots and thought, right, I have to get out of here. But it took me 3 years to work out how to get out of the marriage. And by that time I'd set up my own business as well. Because I'd left the recruitment business.
And there was a reason you left the recruitment business. Maybe you might share that with our audience.
Yeah, sure. So I'd had my first baby and I was still with them. And I went back after 6 months, and I went part-time.
Right.
So part-time in those days was Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. But I still was one of the highest billers. I think I was probably the highest biller in the whole of the north of England and Scotland, actually. So it didn't hold me back. And they promoted me at the end of the year to this business director post with a new flash car and all the rest of it. But they only gave me £1,000 pay increase on my basic.
Wow.
So there was no uplift in percentage commission, nothing. And I just got really angry. I just thought that's a slap in the face. I've earned you over £1,000 a day for a year, and that's all. And so I left. And not really knowing what I was going to do next. We had a big mortgage. One child was the main wage earner. And somebody said to me, well, why don't you start your own recruitment business? And my initial thought was, no, I can't do that. And I slept on it and woke up the next day and went, yes, I can.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, so I
we'll
did.
explore that in just a second. And if you're just joining us now, you're listening to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM, where my studio guest today is Rebecca Bonnington. And we were just following up. There's two threads of conversation happening simultaneously here. One was about the business side and not being recognized for your contribution to a company, which is often a motivation. And you would have come across this for people leaving, some really good people leaving because they haven't been recognized properly. But also there was a home life with a challenge around that. Can we explore that just for a few minutes if you feel comfortable with it? Because I think so many of our listeners, well, hopefully not too many, but will have found themselves in similar positions. When we talk about somebody being an alcoholic, are we talking about a functioning alcoholic as opposed to the sort of the drunks we all have a perception about? Yeah,
and that's the issue, is that so few people understand alcoholism, that the society perceives alcoholism as somebody who's drunk in the street. And that was my perception. But actually, having lived with one, you understand that they are their bodies are chemically dependent on having alcohol. And so he was a functioning alcoholic, except he kept getting sacked. Right. So he ended up as a house husband.
Right.
So to the outside world, I was this career woman building a business, and he was this, in brackets, perfect house husband looking after 2 young kids. And everybody thought he was amazing. You know, all the other mums thought he was amazing and fantastic. But what they don't see is the empty bottles of vodka hidden around the house. They don't see the coercive controlling behavior, the constant. So alcoholics, because they can't control themselves, will try and control the people they live with.
Right.
and anybody who's experienced that will know exactly what I mean. So they, it's very modern now to say gaslight, but they gaslight you. So you end up thinking you're the one who's going mad.
All right.
And it's pernicious and it's slow and it's drip drip. And before you know it, you're a bag of nerves and you've no idea why.
Okay.
All I knew was that every night driving home, I would feel sick and I would just dread going home because I didn't know what I was going to face. I didn't know what would be there. And it came to a head, Alec, because I got somebody in to work with my staff. I'd set up my own business by then, who was an intuitive coach.
Right.
So
Okay.
I was doing wacky stuff before it was trendy, So,
right. Okay.
So I got this lady, fabulous lady, and she sat me down and she said, she showed me a series of pictures. I remember it as clear as day. And she showed me a picture of a crescent moon.
All right.
And I had a real visceral reaction to that. And I started crying. And she went, "Is there something going on at home?" I went, "Yeah." She said, is he an alcoholic?"
Wow.
And I went, "Yeah, how the hell did you know?" She went, "One, I'm an intuitive coach. And two," she said, "you don't know what you're going to get when you get home at night, do you?" And I went, "No, I don't. It's actually quite frightening." And she went, "Right, okay, that happened to me. And I've come across it in other people as well. So when you've lived through it, you recognize it in other people." It was that made me realize, right, I really have to get out of here. Yeah.
I mean, you're obviously a strong woman, because if we take you back to the beginning of the whole story here, about your planning at 13, 14 to get away from home because it just didn't work for you. What about women who are not as strong as you?
It's so hard, Alec. It's so hard. Yeah. If I didn't have children, would I have left? I don't know. I did it for my kids.
Right.
And it was my 33rd birthday. We'd gone away for my birthday. He by that time he had very little bladder control, so he wet the bed.
Oh.
So I woke up on my 33rd birthday at about 4 a.m, going, right, this is awful. And we were staying in a caravan, and I slept in the lounge area of the caravan. And in the morning, my little girl came up to me and said, "Mommy, why are you sleeping in here?" She was only 6. And I lied to cover up for my ex-husband. And I said to myself that I'm never lying again to cover up for his. And it was like, I'm just not lying to my children. So I did it for my children. And I would say to women and men, do it. If you've got kids, do it for your kids, and do it sooner rather than later, even though it's the hardest thing in the world to do. Do it. Just really, really dig deep and just do it. It will save your sanity and it will save your kids' sanity.
And it's interesting because what you saw was an escalation over a period of time. Was it sort of an incremental creep that was going on?
Yeah, definitely, because you, as a drinker, you need more and more and more to get the same effect. And his pattern of behavior was a bottle of cider, 2 bottles of cider, a bottle of wine, 2 bottles of wine, half a bottle of vodka, 3/4 of a bottle of vodka, then a bottle of vodka, and then he couldn't stop. Right. And it was just, he would try and stop, and sometimes he would go for about maybe 2-3 weeks, as far as I could tell, not drinking, but it was hard to tell because he lied so much. Right. And then it just became really obvious. Yeah. And you lose a lot of cognition. So, you lose brain cells. And so he began to not make sense, and they get very irrational, which is why you think you're going mad. So yeah, it builds and builds and builds. It's not pleasant.
No, and I think there are quite a number of people out there in our audience who will sort of resonate with this.
Mm.
And I suppose your key message here is about having the courage and the strength to get away from this.
Yeah, definitely, because they have to heal themselves. You know, they have to take it upon themselves to sort themselves out. You can't save them. You can't rescue them. They have to do it themselves, and they either do it themselves and sort themselves out. And I do know people who have stopped and restored their family life, and by God, you know, my heart goes out to them, and well done then. That's fantastic. But they have to make that decision themselves. And if they can't, you can't help them. Although, you know, if you think you can, you end up drowning with them.
Right. And because I know people will be trying to push people into doing things, and a bit like what you experienced earlier on, somebody pushing you in one direction in the case of your mother, and
Yeah.
you kind of going quite against it, and you
Yeah.
can understand that.
Yeah. You have to, for anybody who's stuck, you can get support to get unstuck, but you have to make that decision yourself, and you have to make that first step yourself to go, right, I'm changing this, and I'm changing it for me
Yes.
rather than other people. And that's where the recovery starts.
Yeah, and it's a tough decision to make.
Yes, very.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story, and as I said at the beginning, we're going to make this a two-part story because we're going to be moving to a new phase of your life. So I'm going to close off this part of the show, Rebecca, by just saying thank you very much for sharing so much, because I think so many people will resonate and take comfort that they're not the only person out there that suffers these things, and there is a light if you're prepared to make the right decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Alec. Absolute pleasure.